Welcome to another episode of the Immigrant Education Collaborative podcast. Today I have a very special guest with me, Miss Judith de Vastey. Judith's a great friend of mine. We went to the same high school. I graduated a couple of years before Judith. But I wanted to bring Judith on because we have, somewhat of a similar story, right? I was born in St. Vincent, and so were my parents, and came to America at 10 years old, went through the American education system from sixth grade on. Judith was born in America to Haitian parents, and I want to have her share her story about, what that was like. So welcome, Judith. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for doing this. What was your K through 12 experience like, having immigrant parents, navigating the American education system?
Let's see. Haitian parents, and there's a saying in a lot of Haitian families. It's called l'église, l'école, l'écaille. And that means church, school, home. Those are the three important things in a Haitian family. So even though my parents were very, very new to this country when they had me, I was the second person on either side of my family born in this country. So very, very, they were very new to the whole American system, everything. Um, School was top priority. Church, not so much. Home was, very important. I was supposed to stay home, supposed to go to school. That was, one of the top things. So even though the school system is very different, that was the big thing in the household. It was like you can't do anything unless your homework's done. If you told dad you're bored, he's gonna say read a book. It's was probably one of the biggest things in the house.
So education was a priority. So tell us about like those early days, right, with your parents who themselves didn't go through the system. So now they have to enroll you, find a school, you and your siblings. And so what was that like, those early experiences?
Actually pretty funny. So being I have an older sister, and I think a lot of times when you have older siblings, the younger kid is going to pick up things a lot faster. So if my sister, she's 2.5 years older than me, if she has a book, then I'm playing in the book. So I think my parents saw early on that I was reading, and they pretty much, we were going to Catholic school, and they tried to sneak me in to kindergarten when I was 4. I was a tall kid, so they're like, she's reading, she'll be fine. So they tried to sneak me in, and just told them I was 5, and I was in kindergarten. I remember getting kicked out because once they learned that my real age, they were like, she cannot be here. We know that she's bright and she knows how to read and everything, but you're not allowed to do this. But I say that to say I was I don't want to say I was homeschooled. I went to kindergarten and the K through 12 system, but there was a lot of learning at home, and I'm talking about serious learning. In the like I was saying a moment ago, if I told my dad I was bored, he's going to say read a book. I was reading Huckleberry Finn at 7 years old. Now this isn't a book that I understood, but if you say to daddy I'm bored, he's going to say go read a book. I'm reading Moby Dick. I don't necessarily comprehend, but you're not allowed to say these type. I mean, you're allowed to, but this is the consequence of saying you're bored. And it's pretty much my father's way of being like, find something to do, or I'm going to find something for you to do.
Mm.
So yeah. So going through school, I don't think for me was too hard, just because there was such an emphasis on that in second grade when the kids are learning cursive. Oh, I've been writing cursive. I wasn't allowed to have a library card without being able to sign my name. And when I showed my dad, like, oh, daddy, look, I know how to write my name, all the letters in the right order. He's like, no, it needs to be in cursive. And he had, gorgeous handwriting, and, he taught me how to write in cursive. So by the time this comes around in school, I'm pretending I don't know. So the teachers are like, wow, look at you picking this up so quickly. But I'm like, yeah, we've been covered this at
Right,
home.
right.
Yeah.
You'd already mastered that. No, that's really cool. So you're going through the system. So tell us, like, let's get to like those middle school years of school. What was that like? 'Cause it sounds like following your sister's footsteps, you kind of have like a nice roadmap of what's ahead, right? And I think that's one of the benefits of having an older sibling go through the
Mhm.
system before you is that you can see and have an idea of, okay, what's to come. What were some of those advantages?
There was a few advantages. I think one thing, and I guess I know you are not the younger sibling, but I think one thing is, and it's still a challenge right now. I adore my sister. I'm very proud of her. I love her, but constantly compared to the older sister.
Mm.
So I know with me personally, I rebelled against that. I was like, I love her. She's great. She's awesome, but I'm not gonna follow in her footsteps. She and I had, My father was very big into uniform in Haiti. Children wear uniform to school. So when he came here, he's looking around and he's like, I don't like the kids not wearing uniform. So we went to Catholic school, not necessarily for religion, but because my father saw they were in uniform. My older sister went to Catholic school through high school. My parents separated when I was 6. My sister and I lived with my father until I was around 12, 13, and then I moved to with my mother. My mother is a little bit more, had a different attitude, different experience. And she was like, we live in a great area. We lived in Montgomery County, Maryland at the time. And she was like, public schools are fine. So while my sister had gone through kindergarten through 8th grade up until 9th grade to Catholic schools, to parochial schools, I switched in middle school. So that was a new experience for me with clothes. My mother's
Mhm.
kind of like, you need, 2 pairs of jeans. I'm like, no, mom, it's America. There's 5 days a week. I got to have gear, and more than
Yeah,
5 days a week. I've got to have 2 weeks worth of gear. So
right.
it was challenging, I think, because I think in my household, I was the first to go to public school. Same thing for my older sister when in Catholic school, it's a small school. You might be in the middle school intermediate section, but you're not going to have the several different classes. So when I get to middle school, I'm learning, oh, I can skip class. But then I'm learning, oh, if I skip class, they're going to call my mother and they're going to say, hey, she didn't come to class. And my mother's going to come to the school. And it's so for her as well being called, and it was minor stuff. If I skip class one day and they call and she comes down to the school, to her it's like, you're going to get kicked out, you better behave. And I'm like, mom, it's not that big of a deal. Kids, it happens. They have to call you and let you know. But then it became a, you can't do this, you have to listen to the teachers. I think nowadays, and I see, let's say the teacher does something that the parent doesn't like, parents are very, very vocal. Me coming up, it didn't matter what the teacher said, if they were wrong or right. I came up in that kind of household, in that culture where what teacher says is the standard. You can't fight back. They might be wrong. They might be, out of line, but you can't go against the teachers.
Did that ever present any problems where you felt sort of not supported, where
Oh
you
yeah.
felt like you had a really solid grievance, but your parents were siding with the institution?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't think of any particular situations, but I know that if, let's say, I remember one time there was an incident in middle school where kids were passing notes and they were putting it on my desk and going, another kid would take the note. And the teacher saw me, I got in trouble, I got detention, and I was, trying to tell the teacher, and I was like, fine, I'll take the detention, explain it to my mother, and she was just like, well, why would he give you a detention if you weren't involved? I'm like, because he misunderstood. But she's like, nope, you've got to listen to your teachers, you've got to
Yeah.
respect them. I'm like, okay, you're not listening, I'll go through with it, but
I can see how that would be a problem. You know what I
mhm.
mean? So for the most part, what would you say, your experience having parents who were involved, and as you're living with your mom, going through middle school, going through high school, what level of involvement did and I don't think, and I knew you around that time, I don't think you needed a lot of guidance. I think you were very independent, very disciplined, very hardworking. So it wasn't, I don't recall any, you know, major corrections needed to be, taking place. But during the
Mhm.
time that you were going through like middle school and high school, do you feel like you had everything that you needed, especially on the home side to support you within the system?
No. Yes and no. I think I had, number one, I had absolutely amazing parents that, and I always look at it, as a parent myself was, raised a
Mhm.
kid out of college, I'm an empty nester, and I can
Yeah,
totally appreciate it, but they're doing the best they can with what they have. And I
yeah,
absolutely give that to my parents. But my father gave me a wonderful foundation. So grades were never an issue for me. I had, also had very strict parents, I'm allowed to get poor grades. I think once you set the bar, if you're getting A's, they know I can get A's. I always have to get A's. I had, pretty strict parents, but as far as like little things, I know I was active in school,
Mhm.
and I think in Haitian culture, your extracurricular is your stuff. So they didn't come to my extracurriculars where I'd see the other parents, rooting their kids on. I was just like, Mom, you can make this, and she's like, that's side stuff. That's
Yeah.
And it was just always the thing of like, you're going to go to college, and it didn't
Hmm.
matter where I went to college, you're going to college. So even as I was picking colleges and asking, my parents' opinion on it, it was just like, just get in somewhere. So
Yeah.
there was no focus on what is it that you want to do. It was like, you need to
Hmm.
go to school, you go to school, whatever you major in, whatever, it's got to be a doctor, a lawyer,
Right.
immigrant families hold those type of professions very highly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was definitely, someone who was fed, sheltered, clothed, those type of things. But as far, and of course, I get A's, good for you, good job. But as far as some of the other things that come up in the American school system with the extracurriculars or the special awards that you're going to get, my mother she didn't see the reason for her to come. Of
Yeah.
course, my parents were at my high school graduation, but for anything else, it was kind of
Yeah.
like, get a ride, go show
Yeah.
for that.
No, and I think we understand that, right? Because
Mhm.
again, they're trying to, get established. They're trying to keep a roof over your head. They try to feed you, make sure you're safe. They're
Yeah.
all these things. So I asked you that question, and you kind of set it up perfectly for me with your response, because it goes to, and you kind of interjected a little bit about you being a parent also, right? So with your experience going through the K through 12 system, right? You go through the system, you do really well in school, you apply to college, you get into colleges, then you decide, okay, I'm going to go to this college, I'm going to study this. So now that you look back with your experience K through 12, right? And you can take a step back and sort of say, listen, how I was like, what careers was I really exploring? What was I interested in doing? And then how did that play out for me after high school? Right. So based on that context, with everything that you learned through your experience, how did that impact your parenting with your child going through the K through 12 system?
I was always taught, or, my father could see, early on that I was bright. And he told my sister, my older sister, she's very aggressive. She's got, forceful personality. You're going to be a lawyer. She's a lawyer. Um, and to this day, actually, she's a judge now. But so
Mhm.
she's gone through this whole legal thing because this is what Daddy said you're going to do, and that's what she did. He was like, "You're going to be a doctor." So I remember, it caused some jealousy. One day he comes home with a skeleton. It was like a glow in the dark skeleton that you had to put together and everything. And I was happy to get the special gift, but I don't really like love science. So it was kind of pushed on me that this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. I had the grades, but the interest wasn't there. So when I got a little bit of freedom and I'm in college, I was jumping from major to major because I'm just like, I don't have these people in my ear saying, this is what you're going to do. And, I might have wasted a little bit of time doing that, trying to figure out what it is I wanted to do. And it got to the point that I was just like, I'm going to stick with this major. I was an English major. I'm like, I just need to graduate at this point. So let me just finish this. So that was a time that I was exploring other avenues. So through that experience with my daughter, she went to a performing arts high school. She was in when she was 14. You couldn't tell, her father and I that she was not going to be a musician, that she's not going to be playing in the Broadway pit. This was, her dream. We would take her to shows, and she's like, I can't, wait to be playing, in the Broadway pit when Lion King is on. But when she got to her senior year and we're talking with her teachers and we're looking at school, she's like, you know what? I don't know if that's what I want to do. Now we
Mm.
have invested time and money and energy into her being a musician. And I was like, you know what? You do what makes you happy. You figure it out. If you don't want to be a performing, musician for the rest of your life, you're always going to be a musician. Fine, but you have the flexibility to do whatever you want. Because at the end of the day, people are always saying chase those dollars. I'm like, you got to do what makes you happy. It's you'll be rich. It sounds silly, but you'll be rich if you love what you do.
I love that. I love that. So, and this actually leads into one of the questions that I have. Again, it's around parenting, right? And this is
Mhm.
perfect for what your daughter went through, because essentially she had a healthy obsession early, right?
Mhm.
She got the bug. She had a strong interest in something early, and then her parents helped to cultivate and nurture that interest, right? And supported that interest, right? Which also allows her, when you have that sort of focus with something, if you decide to pivot at any point, most of those skills that you learn from this thing that you actually acquired a high level of mastery in are very transferable into whatever you pivot into. So it's really like a success framework that you take from one thing to the next. So my question for you around your daughter is a lot of the things that she did, having that healthy obsession early, like how do you see those things helping her out now? Like, do you ever sit back and say, wow, okay, I see why she's like this because it comes from like all those hours that she did here, and you're seeing that in the end, it's working out beautifully.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely by design.
Hmm.
Sometimes, I'll look at her and people be like, "You're so lucky." I'm like, "No, no, no. I intentionally, I didn't know that this was going to be the end result, but it was very intentional with exposing her to things, different things, and things that are traditionally, especially coming from an immigrant family.
Hmm.
And you can relate to this. It's always like you got to find a career that's going to make you rich, and it
Hmm.
was like I love being able to expose her to, the arts, where this isn't something, especially coming from where I come from, it's not, I don't want to say it's frowned upon, but it's like, yeah, that's fine on the side, but that's not something you're gonna make your main focus. But I think that for her she went to a immersion program for kindergarten through eighth grade. So she grew up being bilingual, and then
Hmm.
she went to the performing arts school, and I can see that she operates differently, even to the point where recently she and I were having a conversation. She's got a Monday through Friday type job, 9 to 5, but she was saying she wanted to explore different type of careers. And in my head, I've never even dreamed of not doing that because that's all that I was taught to do. And I was like, oh, I like that you're open to other ideas, that you're open to other ways of making money, of having a career, pursuing your interests. Yeah, she definitely benefited from in a performing arts high school. She spent half of her day doing music, the other day doing academics. So I think that there's a different type of balance where she's able to have different interests, different experiences, and also be able to deal with all different types of people,
Hmm.
all the problems from a different angle. Yes, I think it's been really, really valuable for her to have that kind of exposure.
Yeah.
The exposure to different type of careers as well. I think
Hmm.
in a case when you're standard, high school or kindergarten through 12 year school, you're seeing your teachers and you're thinking, oh, I could be a teacher, I could be,
Hmm.
a doctor, I could be, a mechanic. But as she's going to a school where you have people that, when she was in kindergarten through eighth grade, speak two languages, or as
Hmm.
she was going to performing arts high school, and there's musicians and there's dancers and there's other type of um, other type of careers that she's exposed to, has just given her a different outlook and a different experience.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think what you're touching on is exposure to a lot of things, right? So I'll give you this example. So probably like right after we came out of high school, there was a big push for STEM, right? So the science, technology, engineering, math. This is kind of when the internet was coming of age. But what they quickly found out is that with science, technology, engineering, and math, it's pretty rigid, right? So then they had to kind of morph that and say, you know what, we got to infuse this with some arts, right? So then STEM became STEAM, right? So then it was like science, technology, engineering, the arts, and then math, right? So when I hear you describe your daughter, she kind of embodies all of this, right? So number one, she was in an immersion program, right? Um, she has grandparents who are bilingual already, right? So being in the immersion program, that's activating other parts of her brain, right? Because she's learning another language. Plus, she's in the arts, which also activates another part of her brain, right? So then this is all building the problem solving skills that you need to encounter a world, right, where none of us knows what's around the corner, right? So you have to be sort of flexible, adaptable, right,
Mhm.
and creative in kind of how you adjust and navigate this new world. We're talking about navigating the American education system, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, you know what I mean, early 2000s when we were coming through, right? But now in this world, this new world that we live in, it's vastly different, right? So I love what you said about your daughter because I think that she, like you said, it was by design. Like she's been perfectly raised for the world that we're about to, venture into. Right? Like
Hope
if
so.
you just yeah, if you stuck to like the model that that we came up with, she'd be kind of shell shocked. So tell me how, haven't heard an immersion program, and was this starting at 3 years old?
This was starting at 5.
At five. Okay. So she did another language from five until when? Like all the way through high school?
Through eighth grade.
Through eighth grade.
Eighth
Right.
grade. Yeah. Then in high school, of course, so she went through a French immersion program, which is beautiful for me because my family speaks French, and
Hmm.
it was there was a point where she's in school, and I know a little bit of French, that I might lean over her shoulder and help her with homework. But I remember there was a point where she's, let's say, in third grade, and I'm looking at the science textbook, and it's in French, and I'm like, I can't help you with your homework anymore. You're gonna really have to, make sure that you're paying attention in school. And the kids in that school do great. A lot of parents don't speak French or don't speak a second language, and the kids the kids get by. But yeah, she went through that program from 5 years old all the way
Her
until
program, was her program, it was French immersion. Was it also Montessori or no?
the school knows it was just French immersion. The
Okay.
building that was housed in had a Montessori program, so she would, let's say, at recess maybe play with some Montessori kids. But
Hmm.
I think
Okay.
that she was
Yeah.
exposed to really French.
Yeah. I think that's so important, right? Because even though we're talking about America and it's like, speak English, um, being multilingual, the world is still a huge place, man. It's our oyster, right, for us to play in. So the fact that I'm sure she's fluent in French, fluent in English, it allows her to, sort of traverse the world in a way, in a more comfortable way, let's say, than someone who only speaks one language, right? Because she can seek opportunities in other places, where other people, may not be able to because you only speak one language. So I think this is something that we can't overlook, especially for immigrants who come from an English speaking country and then they come to America. It's really easy to never really pick up another language, right? But I think having that second language is crucial. And I see it with my kids. My kids went to a Spanish immersion elementary school, right? And they started at 3 years old, where they walk in on the first day at three. And so it was Spanish immersion and it was also Montessori. So they kind of had the best of both worlds, right? So they walk in at 3 years old, the first day of school, and 90% of the instruction is in Spanish. So
Nice.
by the time both of my kids were 5 years old, they were fluent in Spanish. You know what I mean? They were like at a pretty, way more advanced than I was, who took Spanish with Miss Powers, for an hour a day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
But yeah, and like you're saying, I'm glad that you were able to do that. That's a great skill to have, and it's one of
Yeah.
those, especially in the world that we live in. Spanish is one of the most, it's a top languages spoken. It's definitely a skill
Yeah.
that's valuable.
Yes. Yeah. So I didn't want to overlook that. I think
Mhm.
that's so, so crucial. So let's go back to your parents a little bit. So tell me, like having immigrant parents coming through the system, what are some of the best lessons you feel like, like when you sit back sometimes and you think about it, you're like, man, I sound like my dad or I sound like my mom because you're seeing that a lot of the things that they were kind of telling you as a child and the ways that they were trying to help you, you now hear yourself like echoing those same things. Like, what are some of those lessons?
I think definitely. I think the education thing, and I know that's an easy one, but it's true. I think
Hmm.
like I was saying earlier in the conversation, school was very, very big, huge to my father, and not even school, just education in general. And even
Hmm.
after you're done with school, you're still always learning. You don't always have to be, going towards a degree to,
Hmm.
to continue learning. So even as my daughter's out of school right now, I'm out of school right now, and as you're talking about the changing marketplace, the changing world and the careers that we have, I'm still always going to have to keep abreast of everything. I still have to continue to figure out what I'm doing today in 2025. In 5 years, that might be different. That might be gone. How am I going to be able to pivot to our changing world? We there's I went to school and I got a degree in journalism, and I had a freelance, had a major paper and everything. And I'm looking now, I graduated around 25 years ago. Journalism looks very, very different than when I got a degree, and
Hmm.
I'm glad I was exposed to it. I had fun doing it, but I'm thinking, where would I be if I had pursued that straight out of college and continued with that, because that's changed tremendously. So I think it was as we grow, as the world evolves, we have to evolve with it. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Definitely the education piece. And I love that. And so what's really cool and you kind of touched on it before, right? Like you're saying, one of the best lessons that you find yourself also not just using it as a parent, but also applying it to yourself. The whole idea of being a lifelong learner, right?
Mhm.
But I want to go back to your parenting style, the way you were parented, and also sort of like the flexibility and the adjustments that you made, right? Where specifically around expectations, right? Like allowing your child to kind of have, you know, the autonomy to kind of choose and explore, her interests, right? Versus having something, whether intentionally assigned or,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So talk about that, like how based on how you were raised and kind of like the adjustments that you made on the fly when you became a parent.
Now, I don't know if it's because I am a parent of an only child. I always, talk to, friends and peers that have multiple children. And I think when you have multiple children, you might, you have to divide your attention. My daughter, lucky girl, spoiled rotten, she gets all the attention. So all the emphasis is put on her. I definitely think I'm a lot softer than my parents, but not in a way that I let her get away with murder, but kind of the, what do you want to do? Or what do you know?
Mm,
How do you feel? Even if she, when progress reports comes out, she's, was just like me, straight A student. So her freshman year of high school, she was slipping a little bit. Nothing terrible, but just a little bit. As opposed to getting in trouble or there'd be consequences when I was growing up, it's kind of like, why are you struggling? What's going on? I don't look at grades as a, this is definite. It's always so it's a way for you to see where you need to improve. So
mm,
she definitely got that. She was, but after we discuss why are your grades slipping, and then then I go back to my immigrant ways or my immigrant parent ways where it's like, nope, get it together. I know you have A's in you, so this is what you have to do. But yeah, I think I was definitely a lot softer, but I also think it is attributed to her being an only child. And I can look now as once again peers, friends that have multiple kids, and I'm like, yeah, I gave her
yeah.
uh, quite a bit of attention.
No, I love that. And I think from the parenting point of view, right? Like the parents can, you can put up guardrails in a sense, right? Like you can still let them explore whatever they're interested in and kind of let them, I don't want to say take the wheel, but let them, kind of have a say in what they want to explore. And then you can have some guardrails and not let it get too out of control. Like, the kid is just playing video games 24 hours a day, but then has no interest in programming and making video games. But they're like, hey, I'm doing research, like not to let it get, too extreme. But I appreciate what you're saying in terms of how you made those adjustments because I think that's something that, we have to be mindful of, right? Like you can keep, there's certain things I'm sure you kept from your dad. Like when she came to you and she would say, hey, I'm bored. I'm sure you said,
Yeah,
yeah,
it was more age appropriate. I'm not gonna,
yeah,
do my 7-year-old Moby Dick, but yeah,
right,
absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
I remember when I lived with my dad, we lived next door. The building next to us was a library. So very early on, I had a library card. And in the summertime, we were latchkey kids. This is the 80s. We're left to our own devices. But when my father came home, we had to every day in the summer have a book report. And it would
hmm
be a page. It's not a big thing. And sometimes he'd give us a topic. And that was, was one of those always learning. It's summertime. I know you don't have to go to school, but you owe daddy a book report. Now, I wasn't as strict with my daughter, but definitely summertime. She'd go to summer camp. In the evening, I'm like, hey, let's take this workbook. If she was going into fifth grade, I could give her a sixth grade workbook. And I'm like, do a couple pages and then you could watch TV. So that was always
hmm
and I, unwittingly did it because I'm thinking all families do this. And I'm not realizing as I, talked to my father later on in life, he was telling me he was homeschooled. And I'm like, oh, so no wonder you were doing all of this with me and my sister in the house. And I do without even thinking about it, the same with my daughter. It's always we're going to learn cursive. My father taught me cursive early. I taught her cursive early. When she went to a French immersion school, I don't know how you handled it, but I know early on I went to orientation and they were saying everything's going to be in French. And I'm, so excited. And they said, we're not really going to focus on English until second grade. And I was thinking, I feel uncomfortable with that. So that night,
hmm
I, used to read my daughter a book every night. I was like, we're going to read the same book every night until you learn how to read it. Let's say it's September. I'm like, I think by Christmas time, you'll be reading all by yourself. Reading that same book every night, maybe in a month, she was reading. So, unwittingly, I'm teaching my daughter to read. I'm, focusing on you're going into fifth grade. Let's, over the summer, let's continue to kind of work on your math skills, on your English skills, so you don't get rusty. But yeah, that's definitely something that picked up from my upbringing and passed on
Yeah.
to.
No, that's really cool. So what I love about your story, right? It's a story about family, and I know your family pretty well. And you had a nice support system in place, you know what I mean? Especially having, older siblings, who, I know your older sister very well, who kept you, who helped to keep you in line. Let's just put it that way. Um, I want you to talk about a few of the people who are not related to you, right? Who like along the way, played an important role. Like they might have been mentors, it could have been a teacher, it could have been a coach. Like who are some of the people along the way who helped to sort of bolster what your parents were doing at home and what your family was doing, who were not related to you? Who were some of those people?
Good question. It was a lot of times, and I'm thinking about it. There was a dear friend of mine that I had in high school, and her mother was an immigrant. Her father was not, but she and I had a lot in common. Just she's another immigrant family as well, in respects to her mother. But her dad was somebody who was always where I might not have necessarily heard the good jobs from my mother or the interest from my mother. I got that from an American person who understands the school system, or somebody who might, as college comes around. Back in the day, now we have the internet. Back in the day, there was a big big book that you would go through and figure out what schools you wanted to go to. Somebody sat down with me. This is a friend's parent she was working on it. It was like, hey Judy, come sit down with us and you go through this bit too and see what colleges you want to apply to. And this is back in the day, we used to write to the college and say, hey, send me an application. But
Hmm.
that exposure was just other families that would see, as me and my friend are sitting down doing homework, saying like, hey, let's give you these gifts as well.
No, that's a great example. Were there like any teachers or counselors within the school system who were just as helpful?
Not necessarily, or not anyone that comes to mind. I think
Hmm.
with me, I'm not going to say I slipped through the cracks, but being a strong student, straight A student,
Hmm.
automatically, the gifted and talented, the honors
Right.
classes and everything. I think and also I was good. I don't get in
Yeah.
trouble. I don't
Right.
talk
Right.
back.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, I think with that, it was just kind of like, you're good. We don't have to worry about you. I think a lot of times the focus might have been on kids who maybe were struggling with grades, or, who had absences.
Right.
I think being a good kid, great
Yeah.
grades,
Yeah.
everything was kind of like, you're fine. You're going to college. Good for you. It wasn't
Yeah.
any,
Good.
no one ever asked me like, is this what you want to do? Have you explored anything else?
Yeah.
I know I only applied to in-state schools just because I was thinking of, I don't know how we're going to pay for this. So I only applied to
Hmm.
in-state schools. No one ever encouraged me to,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, go further.
Look elsewhere. No, I like that. What you're touching on some really interesting issues, right? Because again, they say sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? So when you're one of these kids who sort of, does everything by the book, you get good grades, you're not a disciplinary issue, it's kind of like, all right, we don't have to pay much attention to this person. Like you're good, just go through. And again, we went to a pretty decent sized suburban high school,
Yeah.
right? Where you're talking about maybe like 2,000 kids in the building or more, right? So, like you said, like a lot of things can fall through the cracks, and this is why it's important, like especially if you don't have the support at home, like it's really important to find support, within the school, from your teachers, from your counselors. Just use your resources, because the last thing you want to do going through the system, and I say this over and over again, is to try to do this on your own. You know what I mean? Because you don't know what you don't know. And it's really good. Sometimes you'll have a guardian angel who steps in and does this, but you also have to be proactive and sort of seek out things. But you touched on a lot of issues that we're gonna delve in deeper on in some other episodes. Jude, I thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate you.
Yes.
Um,
Good conversation.
yeah, man. Thanks for taking the time out and sharing your story, man. I was looking forward to this conversation, and I'm happy we were able to get it done. So
Thanks.
thank you.